Number 15. Serial killers constantly exist. Serial killers have a strong presence in media, and most of them go down in history for being infamously mentally insane or generally really interesting. Horror movies, especially in recent years, have gained a huge profit on the notion that serial killers are alive and thriving in our 21st century lives. And actually, that's very true. Individuals that suffer from socio or psychopathic disorders that lead them to murder victim after victim are not a phenomenon based in certain time periods as many of us think. In fact, a pretty recent killer is the Long Island serial killer, proven to have been active in 2011 and allegedly even active in late 2014. There are few clues leading to the person behind these murders, but the deaths fit the quota of a serial killer. According to law enforcement officials and a team of psychologists, there can be anywhere from 5 to 30 serial killers active in Canada and about 30 to 50 active in the US. The human mind is an immensely imperfect operation system, so therefore serial killers and murderers of all kinds will likely be an issue humans will face until the end of time. As dramatic as that sounds, it's entirely true. There's no known medication to prevent certain mental illnesses that have led to serial killings. And even then, those illnesses don't always lead to someone becoming a killer. It's really about chance sometimes. Just be sure to keep an eye on your kids to prevent them from cutting heads off of animals. If you've already caught them doing so, be sure to seek professional help. Number 14. A French orphanage gave out babies as a prize. In January 1912, a children's home for the abandoned raffled off babies. Apparently, the home had been seeking creative ways to raise funds. The home needed money to feed and clothe the children, as well as provide them with proper medical attention. While this sounds pretty innocent at first glance, it's a strange thought to imagine infertile couples standing in a crowd below a stage, raising their hands and shouting their numbers in hopes of winning a live human baby. It, in some way, resembles making bets for livestock or furniture. Though the orphanage claimed to have contacted the authorities beforehand and investigate the winners afterwards, it's still pretty creepy. Even the image used in the newspaper article shows babies in stockings or sacks, adorning the stage around a spinning wheel that determines the winners. This Loterie des Babes, or Lottery of Babies, was apparently a huge hit amongst the public and raised enough money to support the orphanage, as well as other worthy causes. There was never any report of the winners feasting on the babies that Thanksgiving. Number 13. Fly lashes are a thing. This female artist based in the UK is probably most well known for her ceramic female figurines that are painted with tattoos all over them. This work has gained a lot of attention through social media as being a test to beauty standards. While this work is great, there's a whole other side to Miss Harrison that most aren't even aware of. Harrison has a collection of art that is inspired by the human hand and skin. This art features hands outreached with pieces of furniture growing out of the hand itself. If you're squeamish, you probably won't enjoy this art, but if you have a nag for anything strange, then here it is. Another, even creepier piece is her fly lashes, or eyelashes made of fly legs. This photo has actually made its rounds on social media as a meme in devotion to girls wearing too much mascara, but knowing what this actually is, it's pretty gross. If you're interested in exploring the depths of her creepy work, check her out at jessicaharrison.co.uk. Number 12. Victorian-era entertainment involved creepy costumes. During the Victorian era, people obviously did not have TVs or Wi-Fi for entertainment. While the more upper-class families could afford to go see plays and such, the middle and lower class had to find other ways of keeping groups entertained. The most common option was dressing up and pretending to be strange things for one another, basically creating a play all your own in the home, except with no script. Family members would dress as angels, demons, woodland creatures, vampires, and more. After they dressed up, they pretty much just modeled the costumes and cheered each other on. It doesn't seem too harmful, but if you imagine this going on in a 21st century living room, you'd probably be pretty freaked out. Combine that with the skill put into the costumes, you often got pretty scary results. So while there is a plethora of creepy Halloween photos across the web from the Victorian era, it's very likely a vast majority of these photos weren't even taken on Halloween, but rather it was just one of those evenings when the family decided to dress up and take photos. possibly at a family reunion or gathering of some sort that was important enough for photography to be present. Number 11. Victor Salva is a child molester. If you're a horror fan, you know that all of the best horror movies are ones with some strange real-life backstory. Victor Silva, writer and director of Jeepers Creepers, is actually a convicted child molester. Years before, in 1989, during the filming of Victor Silva's first film, Clown House, he kept the youngest star, 12-year-old Nathan Forrest Winters, behind the set. He allegedly filmed sexual acts being forced upon Winters. When the young actor told his parents about the abuse, law enforcement took immediate action and stormed into Silva's home, where they found even more child porn. He was sentenced to 3 years in prison and served 15 months. When Jeepers Creepers released in 2001, it was a huge box office hit. While it seemed that many forgot of the charges Silva received, it's more likely that people took it as fuel to make the film even creepier. After all, the creeper in the film shares a lot of the same qualities of a child molester. Number 10. You can die in your nightmares. Scientists have found that when you die in a dream, you may truly die in real life. During an interview, Wes Craven admitted that the Nightmare on Elm Street was inspired by a real-life disease known as sudden nocturnal death syndrome, or SUNS for short. This disease victimizes otherwise very healthy people. SUNS is a genetic syndrome that mostly affects young Southeast Asian men. However, this disease can actually affect anyone. Basically what happens is the heart beats slowly and weakly during sleep, and then suddenly spasms, which leads to cardiac arrest. There are also unproven theories that the spasms can be related to stress and fear caused during nightmares. To put it in a more simple and scarier terms, nightmares can cause the victim's heart to freak out and eventually give up. So next time you wake up in the middle of a night from a terrifying nightmare, be sure to check you're actually alive. Number 9. A queen caused her subjects to mourn with her. Queen Victoria of the Saxe-Coburg-Gotha, the namesake of the Victorian era, married her husband Prince Albert on the 10th of February in 1840. 2 decades later, in December of 1861, Prince Albert died suddenly of a fever at the age of 42. Victoria and Albert had 9 children together and were madly in love. So after his death, the Queen went into a severe stage of mourning. She wore black for literally the rest of her life, kept her husband's rooms the way he had them before he died, even had his warm water brought in every mornings for his shaving routine, and never appeared publicly for her subjects. The Queen remained in seclusion for about 10 years and became the head of many political issues. In fact, it took her 5 of those 10 years to re-establish the Parliament. During this time, and even when she came out of hiding, the entire society seemed to be in a hole of mourning with the Queen. Many people began only wearing black either as a fashion choice or in respect to the Queen's immense loss. What a macabre thought, a mourning queen ruling over a mourning world, everyone adorning their black attire and walking through life as if in a fog. Number 8. Charlie Chaplin's body was held hostage. In 1977, after a deadly stroke, Charlie Chaplin was buried in the cemetery of a Swiss village above Lake Geneva. A mere 2 months later, his body was stolen from its eternal resting place, and a manhunt for the grave robbers ensued. The culprits called Chaplin's wife and demanded $600,000 in exchange for the body. His wife, Ona, refused to pay the ransom as she felt her husband would find it a ridiculous request for a dead body. The robbers also made life threats towards 2 of Adona and Chaplin's daughters. Police began tracking phone calls, watching phone kiosks in the region, and investigating cemetery employees. The investigation lasted a little over a month, but forces were eventually led to Roman Wardas and Gancho Ganiva. The 2 men were Eastern European refugees who had stolen the body in an attempt to fix their financial troubles. Chaplin's body was retrieved from a cornfield in May that year. Wardas was charged with grave robbery and extortion. He served 4 years of hard labor. His sidekick, Geneva, served only 18 months as he was found to have less involvement in the entire scheme. Chaplin's family created a cement grave to prevent future robbers from gaining access. Grave robbers in general are a pretty dark thought, stealing dead and decayed bodies in hopes of getting money. Number 7. Victorian era surgeries were basically torture. Because of technological limitations, things haven't always been as easy as getting laughing gas to have a tooth pulled or using a heart monitor to track health. Before rises in technology, the simplest things ended up being fatal, and any type of surgery was usually cured with a shot of absinthe or strong pills. Victorian era medical procedures have been infamous for being particularly horrifying. No matter the procedure, you would be hardly numbed and were usually kept fully conscious. There were special team members that would hold you down while a doctor worked very quickly, stabbing at you, cutting you open, and operating on your organs. In fact, if you had to have a limb amputated, you would be held down while the doctor cut through your skin. You were allowed about 2 seconds before a rusty garage saw was pulled out to grind through the bone. The entire operation would end in a minute or less. Some doctors were cleaner than others during the Victorian era, so sometimes after these agonizing procedures, you wouldn't even survive. You'd probably die of infection. There's no real explanation as to why Victorian era surgery was so brutal. Maybe doctors preferred having patients fully awake and sober in order to get a good reading of pain and health. Maybe they worked faster to prevent bacteria having time to set in. Either way, adding this gruesome medical aspect to the already eerie Victorian era makes things way more unsettling. Number 6. JFK's brains and bones were lost. When it comes to conspiracy theories, the assassination of John F. Kennedy is a gold mine. This only became truer when his brain and some bone fragments came up missing. After his death, the salvaged portion of his brain and some skull pieces were moved to the National Archives. 3 years after they arrived, they were found to have come up missing, meaning that they either never arrived at all, or they were stolen sometime during their stay. Many speculate that this was some government cover-up of evidence, as it is suspected his remains held evidence that he was not shot from the back as court records suggest, but rather from the front, which brings about a different theory. There's also a more logical yet still strange explanation that JFK's brother stole these portions of the president to prevent anyone from finding out about his drug abuse or mental illnesses. Whatever the true story, the pieces are completely vanished, and it has been a great addition to the conspiracy theories, as if we weren't already racked enough with the strange thoughts surrounding the loss of the 35th president. Number 5. A young girl's body was exhumed because her town thought she was a vampire. The year was 1982, and a small family belonging to George and Mary suffered multiple deaths caused by tuberculosis infections. During this time period, tuberculosis was referred to as consumption, and it was a vastly spread, terrifying epidemic. This was also the time of the New England vampire panic, an irrational reaction and trend in response to the tuberculosis outbreak. The disease was apparently seen as a consequence of the deceased consuming the life of their surviving relatives. After nearly everyone in the Brown family had died of tuberculosis, many assumed this had to be caused by an undead influence. Another daughter and the mother of the family were exhumed and seemed to be in reasonable stages of decomposition. However, the other daughter, Mercy Brown, was relatively preserved, more so than she should have been, at least. This was because her burial was above ground and in a very cold tomb, which helped the body to decay at slower rates. People during this time weren't thinking that logically though, and when they realized Mercy's body was just too lifelike, they removed her heart from her chest and burned it to ashes. These ashes were later mixed into a tea that her brother Edwin drank. This concoction apparently did nothing to aid his illness, because he died 2 months later. Mercy was not the only dead body exhumed during the vampire panic. However, she is notably remembered for the heart ash tea. Number 4. You're hearing the laughter of the dead. In Hollywood, there's public archives of laugh tracks that studios can buy to use in their TV shows or movies. Oftentimes, these laugh tracks are 20 plus years old, or at the very least contain a few laugh tracks that old added to the newer ones. This means that most of the time when you hear a laugh track in TV or movies, you're hearing the laughter of the dead. Some people may actually find this fact pretty happy. After all, it is laughter, right? But getting right down to that, thinking of unknown people laughing when they've been dead for 15 years or more, just so a studio can save some money is pretty disturbing. Now, not every laugh track contains laughter of the dead, but that kind of adds to the eeriness of it, because you never know. Number 3, spiders melt their victims. Spiders do not have the ability to literally chew, as they don't have a set of teeth. Instead, they puke a digestive fluid on their victims, which breaks them down into a fluid. Then the spider uses its jaw or pinchers to grab and suck up the prey. This is a main reason for the way human bodies react to spider bites. That small area has been affected by the digestive fluids. Now, an even more exciting thought, the huge terrifying spiders from the classic monster movies, pouring this melting fluid all over you and your town. This one included especially for you arachnophobic fans. Number 2, dead people still get goosebumps. How can a dead body get goosebumps if they don't feel the cold? During the decay process, deceased bodies go through many stages. During the early stages, as rigor mortis sets in, and even later when the muscles begin to decay, the hair follicles can harden or react, and the body responds with what is similar to goosebumps, though the reasons are very different. If you don't have experience with dead bodies, it can be pretty strange seeing goosebumps on your great aunt at her viewing. Number 1, a doctor sold cancerous bones. Alistair Cooke was a beloved broadcaster that worked in the field for over 20 years before he developed lung cancer and passed away in 2004. Michael Mastromarino was a man that worked with funeral homes and undertakers. He would illegally purchase body parts, tissue, and bones, which he would later sell to medical companies that worked with transplant patients and cell research for millions of dollars. He and his associates covered their tracks by falsifying paperwork and using PVC piping to replace the bones of their victims. In the case of Mr. Cooke, Mastromarino doctored his paperwork to show that he died of a heart attack rather than cancer. This is especially malicious because cancer cells do not die, and whoever would end up with these organs or bones had a very high chance of developing the same deadly cancer that took Mr. Cooke's life. He had done the same with many other bodies before that had other deadly diseases such as hepatitis or HIV. He received an estimated $11,000 for Mr. Cooke's body, and about 20 or more people across the world currently still have the bones or organs of Mr. Cooke. Despite Mastromarino's dark crimes being discovered in 2005, he was sentenced to 30 years plus in prison, but died of liver cancer in 2013 after only serving 7 years of his sentence. Got an idea for a top 15 video? Be sure to submit it at top15s.net/submit. Be sure to subscribe for future videos. Thanks for watching.